I'm going to show you another project that's really fun that we can use for these special firing techniques. I learned this Peruvian hand building technique from the original owner of Good Dirt, Kate Tremel, and it's a really cool way to stretch and shape a form using an anvil, which is basically just like a river rock shaped piece of clay. You can make your own. We also have some at the studio, and a paddle made out of wood. And when it's done traditionally, you initially form a pinch pot, and then as it dries, you continually put this anvil on the inside and use a paddle to thin the wall and shape the pot. You can certainly start from a pinch pot, but I don't love making big pinch pots, so I'm going to show you my version of this, which starts on the wheel with a very thick, even-walled bowl. And then I'm going to set the thing aside for a day or two until it gets to leather hard and come back and show you how we use the paddle and the anvil to do the final shaping. So, you ready to embark on something that is my version of an interesting indigenous way of making pots? All right, I'm going to take about 2.5 pounds of clay. The size is totally up to you. You can make these really large, but if it's your first time trying paddle and anvil, this is a good size. You don't want to go too big or they get a little unwieldy to handle. Traditionally, they're worked with the hands, but also supported with the feet. So you work on the floor and use both your hands and feet to manipulate the form. I'm just going to show you my version where I do it in my lap on a piece of foam. So starting from a 2.5 pound ball of clay, we're just going to make a very uniform rounded bowl shape. I'm going to center it up. I'm going to center it down to a fairly narrow base because I'm going to use the wood knife to round the form. I'll definitely be checking the thickness of the floor because I want to have plenty of material to be able to paddle it out. By the time these are done, I don't like there to be any evidence that it was done on the wheel. This is just a more expedient way to make the pinch pot. I just find that I get sort of repetitive strain feelings in my thumb muscles if I do it from scratch. I ended up with it a little bit thin in the middle, so I'm just pushing a little bit of clay back. I want it to be at least a 1/2 inch thick, and I'm not going to trim it. I'm just going to paddle it thinner. I'm going to make this a nice rounded interior. And then really not a whole lot of pulling, basically just one pull to get it started. You can imagine how this could very easily be a pinch pot project, but if I can have a wheel turn the clay for me and get it started in this way, I don't really see an advantage to pinching it. I guess if you do pinch it, it's a little bit drier, but I can dry it out pretty thoroughly just using a rib now, and it'll get to leather hard in basically the same amount of time. So it just depends on whether you want to be fully traditional or whether you want to cheat a little bit and use our advantage of having this nice technology for making the basic shape. The original reason that this technique developed was that the clay in the area of Peru, where it originates, was a little bit what we call short, which basically just means it wouldn't work that great on the wheel. It's not very plastic. It doesn't stretch easily, and so by doing everything through compression with the paddle and the anvil, they were able to form beautiful, really beautiful pieces from a clay that isn't nearly as kind as the ones that we're used to. So I'm just scraping everything here, and then I'll probably end up using the chamois just so I don't end up with a sharp edge there. And I'm going to use my wooden knife here to cut off the excess at the base. There's not much, but I've come up underneath that form with the knife, kind of starting at a steeper angle and working underneath. And so I'm going to chamois really quick the top, and then I'll go ahead and pick it up. You know, I'm going to be completely manipulating it by hand, so I'm not going to worry about picking it up wet and turning it over and showing you the bottom. Just round that top out a little bit. And I really think that when you dry these pots, dry them on their rim. That's the principle I follow when I'm making plates, bigger bowls. Basically, if you think about it, you know, the clay dries out at a rate dependent on how much exposure there is to the air. And so if we have a pot like this sitting on its bottom, the bottom is exposed on one side, but the sides are exposed on two sides. So you're going to get a much faster rate of drying up here at the rim than you would get at the bottom. And that's that differential that can cause so much trouble with things cracking. So in this case, we're going to make it, and then we're going to dry it on its rim so that the entire surface of the pot is drying just from the outside, not from two sides. I went ahead and wired under the whole works, and I'm going to lift it up and then just peel off that extra little ring of clay. Well, it just dropped off. So you can see there's a small base. I'm going to just round that out a little bit. This is all going to get smoothed out a lot by the paddle. I just don't want to leave a sharp mark that's going to perhaps telescope back through to the finished product. I'm just going to go ahead while it's wet. And you know, this could have been a pinch pot. It's the size that fits in my hand, and I could have done it that way. But it was a lot faster to do it this way. So now I'm going to just put it on a piece of foam. I find that if I turn soft pots over on foam, they don't really lose their shape, and they don't really get marked particularly. So it's great if you're doing some kind of manipulation of or alteration. Just use that foam, and if the pot is structurally okay to hold its own weight, it's going to be totally fine just sitting on the foam. So this is going to sit out. In my garage, everything takes forever to dry. If you've got a climate controlled space, which this is not, it's going to dry a lot quicker. And so as soon as this gets leather hard, I'm going to shoot the rest of the video and show you how to do the paddle anvil technique. All right, so a couple of days ago, I made this precursor to a pinch and paddle bowl, and I may have gotten it a little stiff. This is definitely leather hard, and I wanted it to be more soft leather hard. But I have brought an anvil home from the studio, and I'll put it back at the studio and tell you where you can find it to use it. I'm also going to show you how to make your own. And I've got a paddle here, which I'll put up there with the anvil. This is a cool paddle that I've had forever. It's got a flat side there, and it's also got a concave side. So it helps you a little bit. If you don't want the shape to expand as much, you can use this concave side, and it kind of keeps the round. So I'm going to work here at the wheel. Obviously you don't need a wheel. I'm just going to put a piece of foam down and show you, because this is where I've got my camera set up. You can definitely work just in your lap, and you'll see how this thing goes. Hopefully it's not too stiff, and yeah, if it is, you'll at least see the idea. All right, so here I am. I've got this foam bat, and this anvil has got a more domed side and a flatter side, and I'm going to be using the more domed side so I can get down inside, and you can see that it pretty much fits the curvature of the bowl. And what I'm going to do is use the paddle and paddle up the side of the pot towards the rim. And I'm going to stop after one little pass and just show you that it's elevated the rim and it's thinning out the side a little bit. And I'm going to come in for another pass. Basically, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go from the bottom up the side all the way around to start with. It's important to keep the anvil on the inside directly across from where you're paddling. That's the whole point, is that it lets you compress the clay. So take your time and move it along. Get maximum compression. I kind of like the idea of sitting on the floor and using my feet to move the pot, but I'm not sure I'm still flexible enough to do that. 10 years ago, maybe, but. You know what's really nice is if you've got an old worn out pillow or something, working on a pillow in your lap is great. Kind of cradles the form. I'm being careful about not actually really womping on the rim itself. I want to leave thickness, just like you would when you're throwing. You want to leave some thickness at the rim until the end. I'm almost all the way around for round one. You can kind of see that the bottom where I wired off is smoothed out now and really quite round. A lot of the throwing rings are going away, and the form is getting a little bit bigger and taller and a little bit thinner. I'm feeling, it looks like I missed a section over here, so I'm going to come back and catch that. If you're still seeing the throwing rings, you know you haven't compressed that part. And the bottom is feeling pretty well thinned out. So what I can do at that point is just go ahead and put it on its bottom, and then I can work just the sides. I'm going to come in and I went up a little too high that time and thinned out my rim more than I wanted to in one go. And the point of this is to produce a round and functional, but kind of organic shape. We don't want perfection. We want this to look like it was hand built. That's the whole point of this paddling business. I'm cheating and using my foot pedal to move the pot along, and I'm actually really enjoying it. Yeah, I definitely got it thin through here. And what you can do is paddle on it a while and get it thinner. And then once you've thinned it out some, you can let it stiffen some more and come back and paddle it some more. And that will help, you know, get a little bit extra stiffness. It's just like drying a form down to leather hard before doing the final stretching. And when I dry it, I just flip it over and dry it on its rim. I'm going to pick it up and kind of assess. And definitely I've got way more thickness down here in the bottom than the top, so I'm not doing an awesome job. But once I hit the rim once, I had this feeling that I needed to go around and thin it out everywhere kind of evenly. I'm going to come back and work sort of on the anvil and paddle some thickness out of this lower wall. The smoother your anvil, the smoother the inside of your pot's going to be. And the anvil is just a piece of bisque clay. It's not anything super fancy. I've seen them made out of wood, and that would be nice too if you have somebody in your life that can turn you an anvil on the lathe. That would be a really cool thing. And I like the idea of an anvil that's got kind of a little mushroom stem on one side that would let you hold it. I'm having to kind of grip it by the edges, but there's some that have like a little stem that you can put between your fingers, and it just makes it a little bit friendlier to hold on to. I'm always just kind of working from the middle outward, thinning that clay out. I'm trying really hard also not to hit the edge of the paddle onto the form. I want to kind of keep it centered so I don't make big gouges. And And as you get closer and closer to your finished thickness, you'll go lighter and lighter with the paddling. So you can see I really got down on that inside and thinned out the lower part. And now I can set it back down and finish thinning out the walls. Sometimes it's helpful to get it up on something. So I have the same chuck that I was using for trimming the bottle. You know, you can set it on a chuck. And now I have access more to the sides. Definitely staying away from the rim now because I want to just thin out this middle section. Straighten it up. It's good to stop and just pick it up and check. You can see how much it's grown. It went from being a little like grapefruit sized thing to being a two-handed bowl. And you know, I can imagine these when they're all done, especially if we use the Avara technique, this would be a really cool bowl to eat some kind of snack out of. I can see putting popcorn in it or some kind of nut or trail mix, or I don't know, just something. It just, you know, it fits in my hand so nice, and it's all just organic and cool. Let me go back and just put a finishing touch or so on this profile. And this time I want to come from the bottom up through and even out that thicker area. Lots of little paddles like this works better than really whomping on it and moving on. It kind of helps it not get stuck to the anvil too. And this one's never going to get big enough to use the flatter side of the anvil. I was just checking to see if I could turn it around, but it's definitely not going to be practical. I managed to cave in my bottom a little bit because I'm trying to work too fast. This isn't a process that you do all in one go. This is definitely a thing where I would now set this on its rim, maybe loosely cover it with plastic, and let it have a little while to set up before I go on and keep thinning it out. Finish thickness, you can go less than 1/4 inch on these. Make sure your rims have a little bit of extra sturdy. These are thinner than I would like. But you can get the main pot pretty light. This feels pretty light considering that it started as a super chunky thing. So I'm gonna set that aside, and I'm gonna show you how to create the anvil so you can make your own. And I would recommend, this one sort of fills the whole palm of my hand. If you're gonna make smaller pots, make a smaller anvil too so you can get down inside. So I'm gonna set this aside and come back and show you how to create that in 2 different ways, one on the wheel and one hand building. All right, so I have some clay here that I'm gonna use to make a hand-built anvil. And so I'm gonna take not much of it off. These don't have to be super thin, but if they're really heavy, they'll be hard to work with. So I've got about 3/4 of a pound. I'm gonna divide that in half, pack it into a nice ball. Pack the other half into a nice ball. And then, you know, good old pinch pots come in handy. We're gonna take and just pinch in the middle. And I'm gonna make a fairly open pinch pot. So I'm keeping the angle of my thumb not perfectly vertical. It's over like this, and it's gonna pinch it out into sort of a shallow bowl. So I'm squeezing between all 4 fingers on the back side and the big pad of my thumb. I'm not using the tip of my thumb, I'm using this full surface through here. And that's gonna get it out into kind of a low curved bowl like this. I'm going to set that one aside, and this side is going to have a little bit more curve to it, so I'm going to pinch a little bit steeper. And I'm doing this a little bit hastily just because otherwise it's going to be really, really boring to watch. So take your time and try to keep this as even and smooth as you can. But don't worry, we're going to trap air between these two parts and we're going to have a chance to smooth it out. So I've got two halves now that basically will fit together, one that's more curved and one that's flatter. And I'm going to very carefully and thoroughly score up the rim. Put a little bit of slurry on my scoring tool. I'm going to really roughen it up. And I'm going to get all the way out to the outside there. I'm going to do the same thing on this guy. Now, I'm going to just say this while I'm scratching. We are making an enclosed hollow airspace, which is a bomb when it goes in the kiln. So you must remember, when it's all said and done, and this gets to leather hard, you must remember to put a little air escape hole in the side. I'll show you on this one. It's not going to hurt anything because it's not the surface that we would paddle against. Just one needle tool's worth, and just make sure it stays open and keeps the two parts from forming a completely sealed pocket. You won't make friends with people if your stuff blows up in the kiln. Okay, so it looks kind of like some kind of weird acorn. We're going to now make sure that it's sealed. So give it a little jiggle and press the two sides together. And then I want to blend, and I'm going to come from the fatter side down and just blend the clay towards that seam. Just using my thumb and sliding the clay. I haven't added any water, and that's important. If you add water, you're just going to slide over the clay. You're not going to actually move the clay. We're just going to close that seam from that side. And then I'm going to come back and close it from this side. Actually, I'm going to take one more pass from the first side, just to make sure it's filling in. Because this is filled with air, I'm going to be able to really reshape and refine this funny little pocket. And if you make a good one, you'll save it for years. If you find just the right shape, they're really, really useful. Just smoothing the seam, smoothing the seam. And honestly, that part doesn't really matter because it's not the part that's going to be in contact with the clay. And then you can treat this now like it's a solid piece of clay and kind of pack it and pat it. And I'm keeping the rounded shape on this one side and kind of the flatter, more shallow curve on the other. And then what's great is if you've got a nice paddle, you can kind of come in and paddle it lightly around in circles and kind of work it. I'll do the same on the other side. This one I'm using a little bit more diagonal to get it to come to more of a point. Lots of little taps. You can see how much that's smoothing out the surface. It really works great. Because that started out looking pretty rough. And then just get lighter and lighter and lighter as you approach your shape that you're after. And little tiny taps to refine it. So that's the dome that I've got going on there. And I will let that just sit, and it can get a little stiffer, and I can put some refinement into the edges, and I can just make this a nicer anvil. But really simple project, couple of pinch pots put together, rim to rim, trap that air in there, and then smooth it out, refine it. And then don't forget, before it gets dry, take your needle tool and make a hole that goes definitely all the way through and lets that air escape. All right, I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to show you how to make one on the wheel. If you don't want to use pinch pot technique, I'll show you how to make one right here on the wheel. This is more clay than I need, so I'm going to take part of it away. This is probably half a pound, maybe 5/8 of a pound. And I'm going to smack it down. Now you've got two ways to do this on the wheel. You could do it just like I did the pinch pots. You could make two shallow little bowls, put them together and kind of refine them. Or I'm going to show you how to do it all in one go with an enclosed form. So I'm going to center it, and I'm going to center the base pretty narrow. This is going to have that little mushroom stem on it. So it's almost like a big knob here. And then I'm going to open it. I'm going to pull it up. And let it get a little bit wide. And then I'm going to pull this top closed. This isn't a super easy thing to do, but give it a try. I'm just collaring around it. And I'm going to put a finger in and kind of pull it towards the center and get it down until it's got just a little neck on it. And then I can just keep collaring until it completely pinches closed. And this is really just kind of a one-sided anvil. You can't use the back side of it, but you can make the front side really, really nice and refined. So I'm going to take the rib and round that out really nice. Squeeze the base a little bit so it's not so bulky down there. And I'm going to push down on top, try to get that a little bit flatter. Doesn't have to be perfectly round. We just have to have a nice rounded surface that's going to go on the inside of the piece. All right, now to take it off, I'm going to come down where that stem is, and I think I'm going to pinch away a little bit of the clay, or trim away a little bit of the clay at the base. I'm going to use my needle tool, and when this gets a little stiffer, I can work on shaping effectively the handle, that knob that's underneath there. And I'm going to pick it up, show it to the camera so you can really see what I've got. Get my goo off my hands real quick. That's got a really nice curve, and that was a lot faster for me anyway than making the two pinch pots and putting them together and smoothing it all out. It's just kind of a one and done. I'm gonna wire under it. Still needs a hole. Still would blow up. All right. Clean my fingers. So that's the anvil, and I'll probably cut off parts of that mushroom part down here. It doesn't need to be so big that I can't get it inside of a pot, but that'll be a nice round surface for paddling against. So those are your options for making your anvil. You're also welcome to use mine. I'm going to put them in Studio 2, which is the middle of the 3 studios at the back of the hand building room, and it'll just be sitting on the shelf in there looking just like that, and you're welcome to borrow it and bring it back. Just make sure that you don't hold on to it for really long, because there's other people in the class pack that might also want to use it. If you don't find the paddle when you come in, there are some textured paddles also in that studio that you're welcome to borrow. And honestly, any piece of wood, it doesn't have to be an official paddle. I've got a little piece of bamboo flooring that I sometimes pull out, and if it's unfinished wood especially, even a little scrap of 2x4 can work nice as a paddle. This one's just nice because it's got that dished out middle. So enjoy this one. This is a really out there kind of project, techniques that we don't normally use, but I think that's why it's compelling. And the finished product is so organic that I think it's going to look really great with our alternative firing. And the Abvara, if you want to use it, it's the way they made things watertight for use in the Baltic countries. I don't think it would pass muster with the FDA, but I would certainly not feel bad about eating some nuts or snack mix out of one. It's just not necessarily the one I'm going to use for my cereal in the morning. So enjoy the project. Shoot me messages if you don't understand, and I will try to clarify. Thank you so much.